Trent Lehman was born on February 23, 1961, into the unique cultural landscape of Los Angeles County, California. The America of the early 1960s was a nation perched on the edge of monumental change, but in the sun-drenched suburbs of Southern California, the post-war dream of prosperity and family life still held a powerful sway. Yet this idyllic image was constantly filtered through the lens of the region's dominant industry, entertainment. Hollywood was not a distant fantasy. It was a local employer, a tangible presence whose sound stages and studio lots were woven into the very geography of the city. For a child born in this environment, with a natural photogenic charisma, the pull of the industry was almost gravitational. From a very young age, Trent exhibited a quality that seasoned casting directors could spot instantly: an unforced, natural screen presence. He was not merely a cute child, he possessed an expressiveness and an ability to connect through the camera lens that set him apart. His family made the decision to enter him into the fiercely competitive world of child acting. This was an ecosystem unlike any other, demanding a paradoxical combination of traits. A child had to possess the unblemished innocence the camera adored, while simultaneously displaying the discipline and resilience of a working adult. The process was a grueling gauntlet of endless cattle call auditions, brief moments to impress casting agents, and the constant looming possibility of rejection. It was a world of ambitious stage parents who served as managers, chauffeurs, and emotional support systems for their young progeny, navigating a complex industry in the hope of securing that one life-changing role. Trent Lehman proved to be more than capable of meeting these demands. He began to accumulate professional credits, landing small roles in television productions that were filming across the city. Each role was a vital learning experience, teaching him the technical aspects of film and television acting, hitting his marks, taking direction, and understanding on-set etiquette. One of his earliest notable appearances was a bit part in an episode of the popular ABC police drama, The Mod Squad. The series was a hallmark of the late 1960s, known for its hip, contemporary feel, and its focus on socially relevant storylines. While a world away from the wholesome image that would later define him, this role demonstrated his versatility and marked him as a reliable young performer in the eyes of the industry. As the 1960s came to a close, another opportunity arose that would cement his place in popular culture, albeit anonymously. In 1968, Walt Disney Productions was continuing its celebrated series of animated featurettes based on A. Milne's classic Winnie the Pooh stories. Following the death of Walt Disney himself in 1966, the studio was committed to carrying on the legacy of these projects, which had been dear to his heart. The child actor who had originally voiced the character of Christopher Robin had grown up, and the studio launched a search for a new voice. They needed a boy who could convey not just youth but also the gentle wisdom and unwavering kindness that defined Pooh's human companion. After a careful search, 7-year-old Trent Lehman was selected. His casting in Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day was a stroke of genius. Trent's natural, unaffected speaking voice was perfect for the role. It lacked the polished, overly rehearsed quality of many child actors. It sounded authentic. As Christopher Robin, he was the calm, sensible center of the 100-acre wood, the anchor of reason and friendship in the face of the story's titular storm. The film was an immense success, beloved by audiences and critics alike, and it went on to win the 1969 Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film. Millions of people around the world were now familiar with the sound of Trent Lehman's voice, associating it with one of the most cherished characters in children's literature. He had achieved a form of anonymous immortality before he had even become a recognizable face. That was about to change. In 1970, Trent Lehman's career reached its zenith. After years of auditions and minor roles, he landed the part that would make him a star, the role of the middle child, Butch Everett, in a new ABC sitcom titled The Nanny and the Professor. This was the culmination of all his hard work, a series regular on a primetime network television show. The series was the brainchild of producer and writer A.J. Carruthers, a veteran of family-friendly entertainment, who sought to create a program that would serve as a comforting antidote to the increasingly turbulent social and political climate. The show was built on a classic and endearing premise. The central figure was Professor Harold Everett, a brilliant academic at a local university portrayed by the respected and established actor Richard Long. A widower, Professor Everett was raising his 3 children with a firm belief in science, logic, and rational thought. His orderly world is turned upside down by the arrival of Phoebe Figalili, a charming and enigmatic British nanny played with a captivating grace by Juliet Mills. Mills herself was a descendant of British acting royalty, the daughter of Sir John Mills and sister of fellow child star Hayley Mills, and she brought a unique blend of warmth and mystique to the role. Nanny Figalili, as she was known, seemed to possess an uncanny sixth sense, a touch of gentle magic that allowed her to solve problems not with logic, but with profound intuition and emotional wisdom. The central theme of the show was this delightful, ongoing dialogue between the professor's science and the nanny's subtle magic. The show immediately found a loyal audience. In an era of television that was beginning to explore gritty realism, The Nanny and the Professor was a haven of gentleness. Its conflicts were small, its resolutions kind, and its core message was one of love, understanding, and the acceptance of things that cannot be easily explained. At the heart of this televised family were the 3 Everett children. Hal, the intelligent and responsible older brother played by David Doremus, Prudence, the adorable youngest child played by a pre-famed Kim Richards, and positioned squarely in the middle was Trent Lehman as Butch. As Butch Everett, Trent became the relatable heart of the show for its young audience. He was the quintessential all-American boy, energetic, freckle-faced, and filled with an insatiable curiosity about the world. He was a collector of objects, an amateur inventor, and the frequent, albeit well-intentioned, instigator of the episode's central plot. For instance, in one episode, The Scientific Approach, Butch's skepticism about Nanny's intuition leads him to conduct a series of scientific experiments to test her abilities with charmingly disastrous results. In another, The Human Element, Butch's desire for a dog clashes with the professor's logical objections, a conflict Nanny must gently mediate. These storylines showcase Trent's natural comedic timing and his ability to convey a wide range of childhood emotions, from boisterous enthusiasm to quiet disappointment. He wasn't just reciting lines, he was living the character. His on-screen chemistry with his fellow actors was palpable. With Richard Long, he projected a believable and touching father-son dynamic, a mix of admiration and playful mischief. With Juliet Mills, his character shared a special bond of unquestioning faith. Butch was often the first to believe in Nanny's inexplicable talents. The cast and crew became a surrogate family, a common phenomenon on long-running television shows. For 2 full seasons and 54 episodes, this was Trent's world. His days were governed by call sheets, scripts, and on-set tutoring sessions. He was a professional in a world of adults, a young boy living an extraordinary life. He received fan mail from children across the country who saw themselves in his character. His face appeared in the pages of TV Guide and teen magazines. By every conceivable metric of the era, Trent Lehman had made it. He was a bona fide television star, living a life that was the stuff of dreams for millions of other children. But in the fragile ecosystem of Hollywood, a dream can quickly become a nightmare. The American television landscape of the early 1970s was undergoing a seismic shift. The gentle, idealized sitcoms that had dominated the 1960s were beginning to feel dated. A new wave of realism, spearheaded by producer Norman Lear, was capturing the nation's attention. Shows like All in the Family were raw, politically charged, and tackled controversial subjects head-on. They reflected the tensions of the era, and audiences responded enthusiastically. In 1971, executives at ABC made a strategic, but ultimately catastrophic, programming decision. In an effort to bolster their Friday night lineup, they moved The Nanny and the Professor from its established and protected time slot into a new one, directly opposite the undisputed ratings champion of television, CBS's All in the Family. This programming move was known in the industry as a death slot. The gentle, whimsical charm of the Everett family stood no chance against the cultural juggernaut of Archie Bunker's provocative social commentary. The Nielsen ratings for The Nanny and the Professor plummeted. Guided by the cold, unforgiving logic of viewership numbers, the network canceled the series. For the adult actors on the show, the cancellation was a professional setback, a disappointment they were equipped to handle as a known risk of the profession. For 10-year-old Trent Lehman, it was the collapse of his entire world. The daily routine, the on-set family, the public identity, and the sense of purpose that had defined his life for 2 years were gone almost overnight. The applause had ceased, the studio gates were closed to him, and the phone calls from agents and producers stopped coming. This sudden void marked the beginning of a slow, painful unraveling. Trent attempted to transition his sitcom stardom into a continued acting career. He and his family hoped that the recognition he had gained would open new doors. He did manage to secure a handful of minor roles in the years immediately following the show's end. He made guest appearances on established shows like the popular Western series Gunsmoke. However, these were fleeting one-off jobs, not the steady, meaningful work he had been accustomed to. He was no longer a series lead. He was now just another young actor in a sea of thousands, hustling for a line or two. In 1974, a brief, poignant echo of his former success emerged. He was contacted by Disney to once again lend his voice to Christopher Robin for a new animated short, Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2. For a moment, he was back in a familiar and celebrated role, but this experience likely highlighted what he had lost more than what he had. By this time, he was 13 years old. He was in the throes of adolescence, that awkward and transformative period that is the bane of almost every child actor. His face was changing, his voice was deepening, and the cute kid persona that had made him a star was fading. In the ruthless calculus of Hollywood casting, he was becoming a commodity of diminished value. The industry that had so eagerly embraced his childhood innocence had little use for his adolescent uncertainty. The decline was no longer a possibility. It was his reality. With his professional acting career having stalled, the most difficult transition of Trent Lehman's life began, the attempt to return to a normal existence. He was enrolled full-time in the public school system in the San Fernando Valley. This shift from a television soundstage to a junior high school classroom was a profound and deeply alienating form of culture shock. On set, he had been a professional colleague, a peer to adults. In school, he was an outsider, a curiosity. He was trapped in a painful psychological limbo. He was not a celebrity, but he was not anonymous either. His face was just familiar enough to make him the subject of constant, unwanted attention. He was that kid from that show. He had to endure the whispers in the hallways, the pointing in the cafeteria, and the awkward, often insensitive questions from classmates who could not possibly comprehend the world he had come from. This experience created a deep sense of isolation. He couldn't relate to his peers, whose lives were filled with concerns that seemed trivial compared to the career he had already had and lost. This led to a form of identity crisis that is common among former child stars. He had so thoroughly integrated the identity of Butch Everett, the actor, that when that identity was stripped away, he was left with a terrifying question: who was Trent Lehman? The search for an answer to that question defined his teenage years. He tried to forge a new identity, one that was wholly his own and separate from his Hollywood past. He developed a deep passion for motorcycles, embracing the freedom, power, and element of danger that came with them. Riding was a visceral escape, a way to feel in control in a life that felt increasingly out of his control. But while it provided a temporary outlet, it could not heal the underlying wounds of rejection and loss. As he progressed through high school and into his late teens, his struggle with depression deepened. In the 1970s and early 1980s, public understanding of mental health was extremely limited. Depression was often not seen as a clinical illness, but as a sign of personal weakness, a lack of character, or something one could simply snap out of. The sophisticated therapeutic interventions and pharmacological treatments available today were not an option for him. He was largely left to battle his inner demons alone, in a society that offered little sympathy or support. After finishing school, his inability to adapt to a conventional life became even more pronounced. Having missed out on many of the normal developmental experiences of his peers, he found it difficult to hold down regular jobs. The 9-to-5 world, with its mundane routines and structured hierarchies, felt alien to someone who had grown up in the project-based, high-stakes world of entertainment. He was caught between two worlds belonging to neither. He was too famous to be normal, and not famous enough to be a star. This sense of failure and displacement became a chronic and corrosive force in his life. By the end of 1981, Trent Lehman was 20 years old and spiraling. He was unemployed, financially insecure, and locked in a severe, untreated depression. The bright promise of his childhood had devolved into a bleak and seemingly hopeless present. The vast chasm between the celebrated boy he had been and the forgotten young man he had become was a source of constant private torment. In a moment that can only be understood as a desperate cry for help, an act of self-destructive rage against a world that he felt had abandoned him, he vandalized a public bus stop, smashing the glass of the shelter. It was a minor crime, but it brought him into contact with the legal system. He was arrested, processed, and for his act of vandalism, a judge imposed a fine, $240. On the surface, it was a modest penalty. But for Trent Lehman, in his state of mind and financial precarity, it was a catastrophic and deeply humiliating blow. This was not a sum he could easily produce. The $240 fine became a concrete symbol of his complete and utter failure. It was tangible proof of his poverty and his powerlessness. The boy who had once earned a handsome television salary, whose face had been a valuable commodity, was now unable to scrape together a few $100s to clear a minor legal trouble. The shame of this situation, piled atop his existing depression, was unbearable. It was the final straw on a spirit that had already been broken. The weight of this final failure, combined with years of accumulated pain, pushed him over the edge. The abstract despair he had been living with for years had now been given a number, a price tag for his own perceived worthlessness. The path forward seemed impossible. On the night of January 18, 1982, a little over a month before what would have been his 21st birthday, Trent Lehman made the irrevocable decision to end his life. He left his family's home and walked through the dark, quiet suburban streets of Pacoima. His destination was not random. It was a place freighted with profound personal symbolism. He made his way to the Vena Avenue Elementary School. This was the school of his own childhood. This was the playground where he had run and played, the classrooms where he had learned to read and write. It was a place that represented a time before the auditions, before the fame, before the character of Butch had been created. It was, in a sense, the last place where he had simply been Trent Lehman. To this place of innocent beginnings, he returned to enact his final desperate end. There, in the cold and silent schoolyard, under the cover of darkness, Trent Lehman took his own life. He hanged himself from a chain-link fence that enclosed the school grounds. It was a solitary and deeply tragic end to a life that had once been so public. His body was discovered the following morning. Trenton Lehman was 20 years old. His death caused a small ripple in the entertainment press, noted as a sad footnote in the ongoing saga of Hollywood's lost children. There was no large public mourning. The industry and the audience had long since moved on. Yet, his story remains one of the most poignant and cautionary tales of its kind. He was not a victim of the typical scandals of drugs or financial exploitation that plagued many other child stars. He was a victim of something quieter but just as lethal: the psychological devastation of being built up and then completely abandoned by the fame machine. His life serves as a solemn reminder of the human cost of entertainment and of the profound responsibility owed to the children who are thrust into its bright, unforgiving spotlight. His voice lives on, unrecognized by many, in the timeless joy of the 100-acre wood, a permanent echo of a life that ended far too soon. And that wraps up today's video. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like, leave a comment with your feedback, and subscribe to stay updated on upcoming videos. Appreciate you watching.